The fun continues at SEC Media Days, part of our Capital One Orange Bowl media tour presented by Duffy's Sports Grill. So I'm sitting across from Andrea Adelson. She covers college football. She's a reporter for ESPN. You've heard her on WQAM like a zillion times with Joe Zagacki. I think you've been on with Joe Rose in the morning as well. You've been on our show, Hockman and Crowder, a couple times also. But we just became best friends off the air because I knew you had ties to South Florida. I know you live in Florida. I didn't know we grew up in the same area. Couple years apart, just a couple years apart. But we went to the same elementary school, Devonair Elementary.
Woohoo!
And we went to the same middle school, Arvida Middle
Woohoo!
School. And then you ended up going to Killian?
I did.
Oh, man. This
Yeah.
is, like we literally just became best friends off the air because we grew up in the same area.
We could spend the entire interview talking about how great Devonair, Arvida, and Killian are,
Yes.
but I don't want to bore the listeners, right? But
We've got a lot of K-Town listeners, though, Andrea. We do. A lot of them.
Let me just say real quick, when you said you went to Devonair, like my heart skipped a beat a little bit because you don't ever ask people, where do you go to elementary school? It's always, where'd you go to high school? I have never met anybody who's gone to Devonair outside of the group of kids that I went to Devonair with.
Right.
It's changed and it's different and it's a K through 8 now,
Yeah.
but I had so many awesome memories at Devonair Elementary, and I am going to share a little nugget too.
Oh,
so,
let's go.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Al Riveron, who used to be an NFL official and is now the ACC head of officiating, worked at Devonair Elementary when I went there. So he was a camp counselor and he did some of the after-school activities. And so when he became an NFL official, I'm like, I swear that's Albert, because that's what we called him when he worked as a counselor. I swear that's Albert. I swear that's Albert. I finally got confirmation that it was. So last year at ACC Media Day, I see him, and I'm like, do I tell him? Do I tell him I was there at Devonair when he was there? I don't know what to do here. You know, going up to an athlete, whatever. But going up to Albert, I was like, what do I do? So I went up to him, and I was like, you worked at Devonair, right? Yeah. I'm like, well, I was one of the camp kids while you were there.
Unbelievable.
And he still lives in his same house down in South Miami. And so these connections of people who are from our area and specifically Kendall, they mean a lot, especially as you get older and move away from home. So it's awesome.
Yeah, so I went to summer camp at Devonair as well.
Yeah.
I did whatever,
Those were so fun, right?
The best.
The best.
Super Wheels. You'd walk right over to Super Wheels. They'd take you to Don Carter's to go bowling as well.
Absolutely. Oh.
Yeah, rest in peace, Don Carter's. I don't know if you know, it was Hot Wheels back in your day.
So,
then Power Wheels, then Super Wheels. So the owners actually closed Super Wheels a couple months ago, not too long ago, but it's still a skating rink. Somebody else bought it. They put some money into it. So the legend lives on, but technically Hot Wheels, Power Wheels, Super Wheels is no more, unfortunately.
So Hot Wheels opened when I was in 4th grade, and I had one of the very first birthday parties at Hot Wheels. So again, we could spend the entire interview, but we don't want to do that.
No,
but,
well, I do, but I do have some questions for you about the Miami Hurricanes. We're here at SEC Media Days.
Yes.
Let me reset again. Andrea Adelson, college football reporter for ESPN. You can see her on ACC Network as well throughout the season and throughout the offseason also. She joins me here at SEC Media Days, part of our Capital One Orange Bowl media tour presented by Duffy's Sports Grill. Yesterday we heard from Greg Sankey. I know you were there, the SEC commissioner. The big story, I think, especially in South Florida, fans, they all know there's a big lawsuit happening right now. ACC, Clemson, FSU, and he was asked about it yesterday. Can I say the answer we got from the commissioner was expected? He's not interested in recruiting. 16 teams is what we're focused on now. 16 teams is what we'll be focused on later. But it's still kind of looming over everything happening here this weekend.
Yeah, it really is, because when you've got those lawsuits between Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC ongoing, and by the way, there's one in Tallahassee. There's one in South Carolina. There's 2 in North Carolina. So none of them have been combined or anything like that. They're all proceeding along these parallel tracks as the ACC argues one thing and Florida State argues one thing and Clemson argues one thing. The question, of course, is what's the end point here?
Right.
Where are they going to end up? Because it feels as if bridges have been burned and maybe they wouldn't be back in the ACC depending on what happens with how this plays out. Again, all speculation, but nobody knows how it's going to happen. And if you're Florida State, and you've been making all this noise for the past year, it seems very clear that your future in the ACC is kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
So do they end up in the SEC? Do they go to the Big Ten? There's been talk about the Big 12. Nobody knows. Nobody in Tallahassee knows. Nobody in the ACC office knows. And certainly nobody in the SEC knows. And so, of course, Greg Sankey's going to be asked questions about, are you paying attention to the lawsuit? How do you think that's going to play out? And, of course, he's going to say, I'm not a recruiter. You know, there are back channels and whatnot to these things. But, of course, he's going to say we're 16 today and we're 16 tomorrow. And I asked him a follow-up. Let me just ask, does tomorrow mean, like, the day after today, or does tomorrow mean the long-term future? And he's like, this is the third time I'm being asked this. So he started to get a little grumpy about it.
Right.
But the fact remains that the SEC is obviously the most attractive conference in America. And so he's going to be asked questions. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC kind of started all of these dominoes that have fallen and led Florida State and Clemson to this point. And so he said all the right things. And he has said nothing different than what he's been saying over the last 2 years, but those questions are only going to continue as long as those lawsuits are hanging out there.
And I think he's playing it the right way, by the way. Downplay the whole situation, but if the SEC would be able to take on Clemson and FSU, if it benefits everybody, I think that might be the best case scenario for the SEC moving forward. As far as shifting over to the Miami Hurricanes, looking ahead here, I know a lot of people consider Mario right now not necessarily on the hot seat, but with NIL, they've killed it there. You talk about Cam Ward now in South Florida, the addition there, and just everything that's happened throughout his tenure in Miami thus far. I think expectations are certainly heightened. But we've heard this before, Andrea, haven't we? Oh, big things expected down in Coral Gables. Can this year be different finally, do you think?
How many times have we talked about his Miami back?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to keep saying that? Look, here's the thing. I don't think Mario's on the hot seat, but I do think he has to win this year because of everything that you just said. What they've been building to since he got there, and he has been very clear about having to redo the foundation, establish a culture that he wanted to establish there. Go into recruiting. They've signed top recruiting classes since he's been there. They've signed top portal classes. But the work he's done this past offseason with the portal, combined with now these recruiting classes where you're expecting the potential to be developed further, combined with the schedule, yes, it looks like Miami should be penciled in to make the ACC championship game. But how many times have we penciled Miami in to make the ACC championship game?
My entire life.
This happened once or twice, right?
Yeah.
So the fact is that there should be expectations because, in my view, Miami probably has the most talented roster in the ACC going into the season because of what they've done through the transfer portal. I'm sure Florida State fans are going to be mad at me and yelling at me on social media for saying that. Florida State's right there. Clemson is right there. I think those are the three most talented programs. But Miami has to prove it.
Right.
They have to show it because they've been among the most talented programs in the ACC.
No more losses in October to Georgia Tech, right? You can't lose those games.
Duke, you know, how many? Virginia.
It's always one of those games that keeps Miami from kind of getting over what everybody expects them to be. It's the random loss to Duke. It's the random loss to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, for me, that opener against Florida is a game that I think Miami fans look at and say, we should win that game. You know, Florida was okay last year, and they struggled defensively. Florida's going to be motivated. That is a home game. That is a very, very, very difficult place to go play and win. So you look at that game and the stakes for both of those programs, by the way, because the stakes are high for Billy Napier. He's more on a hot seat, I think, than Mario Cristobal. I think Mario Cristobal has the patience of the administration no matter what happens this year because he's the guy. Right. This is the guy everybody at Miami wanted, and he's being given everything at his disposal to make it happen. Florida, on the other hand, doesn't really have that same type of emotional tie or connection to Billy Napier. Their schedule is incredibly difficult. So I just have this vision of whoever loses that game, the fan base reacting in a very, very, very negative way, and how that could potentially affect what happens down the road. So for me with Miami, they've got to win that game.
Yeah.
They've got to win that game. And again, they can survive a loss in that game and win the ACC and make the playoff. But what I worry about for Miami is a loss in that game, because Miami doesn't handle losses in big games very well.
Right.
Is a loss in that game then affecting what happens down the line? It shouldn't in the next 3 games. But then Virginia Tech at home at the end of September is another huge, crucial game for the ACC, spot in a championship game potentially. So I'll be there in Gainesville. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be hot. Really, really hot for a 3:30 kickoff. But the stakes in that game couldn't be higher. This is why we love college football.
It is.
And again, the rivalry.
Right.
Nobody talks about how much they despise each other.
And when's the last time this game mattered this
Yeah.
much, right? You feel like it could almost turn the tide for either
Yes.
program based on one game.
Absolutely. And I think that's why that 3:30 slot is just so big, because so many people are going to be tuning in and
Right.
paying attention to watch it. Because quite honestly, college football is better when Miami, Florida, and Florida State are fighting
Yep.
for the top spot, right? And we haven't had all 3 really good at the same time in a real long time. All right, and
yeah.
I'm biased. I know I'm biased as a South Floridian who covers the ACC and went to the University of Florida. I get it. I have like the trifecta there. But it's just better. More people are invested because you either love it or you hate it, but
Right.
you're watching. And it's passion and it matters, and I can't wait.
Wait.
Is it August 31st yet?
It's not.
I can't
It's
wait.
not, but it should be. Andrea Adelson, again, college football reporter for ESPN, South Florida native, Kendall native.
That's right.
I'm so happy that we had this conversation today. Thank you very much for joining us here at SEC Media Days, and we will definitely talk again soon. If it's not, prior to the game, UF-UM on August 31st, it's just to talk about Kendall. So I cannot wait.
Cannot wait. Thanks for having me.
Andrea Adelson will take a break here. Again, part of our Capital One Orange Bowl media tour presented by Duffy Sports Grill. More Hockman and Crowder next.